You are listening to KLRN Radio, where liberty and reason still reign.
All writers are prone to becoming so attached to our characters and stories that we struggle to see why a passage may not be working. It takes another set of eyes to help us nurture our writing to full maturity. At Black Wolf Editorial Services, we strive to enable writers to develop and grow, shaping stories into masterpieces that can stand the test of time. Editing services are provided for all genres and all age categories. Services range from critiques of the short story through to the line edits of the full-length novel and copy editing for those preparing for publication. We also offer assistance on generating a writer's bio for your websites, as well as help with those book blurbs and promotional material. We won't abandon you to the masses. We want to celebrate with you in your successes. Black Wolf Editorial Services, nurturing your writing into maturity. For a full list of services and prices, visit us at blackwolfeditorial.com.
Individuals and businesses with tax problems, listen carefully. Do you feel like you're losing control over your finances? If you owe over $10,000 in back taxes or have unfiled tax returns, we can help you take back control. The IRS is the largest and most aggressive collection agency in the world, and they can seize your bank account, garnish your paycheck, close your business, and file criminal charges. Take control of your tax problems now by calling the experts at Tax Mediation Services and take advantage of the Fresh Start program and new laws that may allow us to negotiate a settlement for the lowest amount possible. Our team of tax attorneys and enrolled agents can stop collections and get you protected so you can take control of your financial future. Tax Mediation Services is accredited by the Better Business Bureau. Call now for a free case review and a price protection guaranteed quote.
Call Tax Mediation Services now at 800-610-9050. That's 800-610-9050. 800-610-9050.
KLRN Radio has advertising rates available. We have rates to fit almost any budget. Contact us at advertising@klrnradio.com.
This is Slickery Trigger for Rebel Road Tactical. With proper care and feeding, your pistol will be ready when you need it, there to save your life. Shouldn't your gear be that good? Whether you need a holster for comfortable everyday carry or a tough-as-nails holster for your next training course, Rebel Road Tactical has what you need. Check us out on the web at rebelroadtactical.com.
Tired of paying outrageous prices for Viagra? Well, we have great news for you. Now you can finally get Viagra at huge discounts. Healthy Man allows you to save up to $500 on Viagra. Why pay U.S. pharmacy prices of $15 per pill or more when you can get Viagra for less than $3 a pill? Call today and get 40 Viagra pills for only $99. This can cost as much as $600 at your local pharmacy. You can't afford not to call us. If you want Viagra at the lowest prices, never pay $15 a pill pharmacy prices again. Get Viagra for less than $3 a pill. Call 1-800-516-7602 today and save up to $500 and get 40 pills for just $99. Healthy Man is fast, easy, and affordable. Operators are waiting at 1-800-516-7602 to take your call right now. Call 1-800-516-7602. That's 1-800-516-7602. Again, 1-800-516-7602.
Get ready to fight from within. You're about to go behind enemy lines.
Roger, 3-2. Goliath copies all. Go ahead. Target is surrounded by multiple firms entering what appears to be a residential area. Requesting permission to engage.
From the People's Republic of New York City, you're now going behind enemy lines with Gene Baradelli and Russ Gallo.
And you're now behind enemy lines. Hey there, how you doing, America? Gene Baradelli here with you. Thanks for tuning into the show, whether you're listening to us at www.behindenemylines.radio.us, or if you're listening to us on any one of our rebroadcast outlets, glad you're with us on those, which we'll be giving a whole bunch of shout-outs to later, or if you're listening to us on podcasts on any number of podcasting platforms that are out there in the world, however you're listening to us, thank you for listening. Got a great show for you this week, talking about the birth of a new administration. Donald Trump, now our president, has taken the oath of office, hitting the ground running with a bunch of different policies and plans, and meeting with a lot of great people. We'll be breaking a lot of it down in a few minutes. We're also going to be talking about how at least my social media has been absolutely lit up by liberals screaming at me about a whole bunch of different things, especially this kerfuffle about the inauguration and how many attended here. Can I get a head count? It's a lesson in absurdity, folks, and we're going to get into that a little bit later. We'll also be talking about protests and violence on the streets in the first hours of Trump's administration actually taking office. We got a lot to break down here, folks. It's going to be an interesting first 100 days for President Trump and our nation, and we're happy to look at it all. And listen, I promise you, I know that some of you who maybe listen to us for the first time, maybe on WLBB in Carrollton, Georgia, or WDDQ in Adel, Georgia, WJHC in Jasper, Florida, wherever you may be in the world. Some of you who know me, some of you don't, but let me just say this from the outset. I pledge, I can't speak for Russell Gallo, who my co-host, and shout out to Russell. We'll be getting him on in the coming weeks as soon as we get the show established here in our new digs, aka my new house. But here's what I'll say to you, everybody. Here's what I say to you. I promise to try to be as fair as possible to all of our listeners. If there's something that Donald Trump is doing that I love, I'm going to say I love it. If there's something that Donald Trump is doing that I disagree with, I'm going to say I disagree with it, and I'll give you reasons why. I'll always give you reasons why either way, no matter what. But let's set these ground rules at the onset here, folks, because there will be other people out there who will be loving every single thing that Donald Trump does. I'm looking right at you, Russell Gallo. They'll love every single thing that he does. I'm just kidding about Russell. Russell won't do that. At least I hope not. They'll say everything is rosy and wonderful, and they will justify every action, even if it is something that they totally, absolutely, 100% disagreed with, or if it was something, let's say, that a previous administration had done, but now that there's a Republican in power, they are going to let it go. I'm not going to do that. I don't plan on doing that. I'm going to call it as I see it. There are going to be times when you're going to be a disagreement. That may Italian out there. Disagreeing. You're going to be disagreeing with me about certain things that I say. I welcome you to comment at www.behindenemylinesradio.us or on our Facebook or Twitter at BEL_radio. Let me know if you disagree. Let me know what you think. I appreciate all the feedback you can give me. But let's set these ground rules up right now so that we understand exactly how things can be played around here. We're going to play it as we've always played it on this show, calling it as we see it. So let's start calling things out, and let's start seeing what we think about it. First thing that I want to talk about is the real first step in breaking away from the Obama administration and their policies that Donald Trump did of real substance, which is recommitting to the Keystone XL pipeline. For those of you who don't know what that is, it was a proposed pipeline that would take oil sands in places like Alberta and parts of Canada where they have this oil-rich sand that they can convert into oil and have it transported as far down as to our Gulf Stream region. So it is, I always thought, anyway, a beneficial project for this country because it would create jobs in the building of the pipeline. It would create jobs in the maintaining of the pipeline. And honestly, I thought it was something that was supported by both sides of the aisle. We shall see. because it's now back on the table after the Obama administration basically just took it off the table and decided unilaterally to not pursue it. Here's why this is so good. Like I said, first, it shows a clear break from the previous administration. It's a clear definition builder for Donald Trump. I am not my predecessor. He may have talked the talk before, but now he's walking the walk. Second, if this pipeline wasn't going to come to the United States, it was going west towards Asia. It was going to go underwater and to possibly China or other partners out there that could then get a competitive advantage in the energy field. Obviously, energy consumption is a very big issue here in our country, and we need all the resources we can get. This pipeline is not the end-all, be-all. Let's understand that. This pipeline, the Dakota Access Pipeline, they're not end-all, be-alls. They're not going to be game changers in our energy policy. They're not indispensable, but they help. They help in generating more jobs right now, where jobs are badly needed, and it helps with greater energy delivery in our country. That's just good policy right now. Donald Trump, I've heard people call this a layup for him. It definitely is one of these things where it's just a no-brainer decision. Unions should be happy because they're going to be union jobs are going to be created as a result of this project that's going to be undertaken. It's going to be a very large project going across many states. Our energy policy, this goes right into our energy policy and consumption. And you know what? It just makes sense to keep this advantage away from other foreign actors on the other side of the world. It's a no-brainer. This is a great idea. It's also great because Donald Trump has shown with this first step that he is not someone to be trifled with on the negotiation field either, in the negotiation side of politics. In the executive orders, Donald Trump has made certain things very clear. All executive orders are subject to favorable negotiations that are then signed off on later on. So the order itself is non-committal. And he actually made a point to say that he will insist, as one of the conditions in his negotiations, put it out front right now, that the pipes for the pipeline, the actual infrastructure, must be built in America, made in America. Jeez Louise, what a concept. Having that at your outset in your negotiations is very important, I think. Russ Gallo talks about this all the time on the show when I actually had the technology to get him on. You start at a point that is most favorable to you, 100% favorable to you, and then you move towards the middle as much as possible. One of the biggest problems I always had with the Obama administration, or with even the House Republicans or whoever's in power, is they start at a midpoint in the negotiation, and then they moved, especially with the House Republicans under John Boehner, they started in the midpoint, and then they ended up further to the left than they really should have ever been. Donald Trump is setting up a clear goal. Pipes are made in the USA. Jobs created in the USA. Industry in the USA. It's part of making America great again, I guess, in his mind. And to me, that is a great first step. Another policy we could talk about that has been controversial is this defunding of international Planned Parenthood. For those of you not familiar with this, Donald Trump made it clear that no foreign money could go towards abortions coming from outside the country. And it is a step that caused a whole hubbub on the left, especially the Planned Parenthood side of things. International Planned Parenthood loses funding as a result of this executive order. The executive order itself, when you hear about it, is not so darn controversial. Again, look at the details of what he said. What he is doing is basically reinstituting what's been known as the Mexico City policy, or the global gag rule is what it's called. It was first ushered in under President Reagan, and it barred federal funds from going to foreign organizations that perform abortions overseas or lobby for the practice's legalizations here. American taxpayer dollars, already under the Hyde Amendment, cannot go towards towards this, as you may have heard that talked about on the show before. But there was this loophole that was taken away and is just now reinstituted by Donald Trump. It's to me, it's a reinstitution of a conservative policy created by a conservative icon. And I think it just goes along with the idea that we've been talking about on the show, American values first. It goes along with Trump's theme. This is an American value. You already can't get federal money to fund abortions here. Why allow anything to happen overseas if it doesn't go along with this American ideal? And again, listen, I am not considering myself to be pro-life in any stretch of the imagination. I mean, in my personal life, I may be, but my outward position as a true conservative is that individuals should be allowed to make their own decisions. That being said, my taxpayer dollar shouldn't go to fund somebody else's life decision. At this point, I like what Donald Trump's doing. I see a lot of things that I think we can be encouraged about. I see a lot of things that we shouldn't be encouraged about, and we'll get into some of those later on as well. But honestly, folks, this is a good start. We're starting with the ground running. And we're starting with the ground running without a Secretary of State, without a UN ambassador, with Chuck Schumer and the deposed Democrats holding up the selection process of an incoming president in order to basically make him look bad. You hear I'm getting a little exasperated about it, but imagine if the tables were turned and this was a newly elected Democratic president, and that newly elected Democratic president picks their cabinet positions. What do you think would be the response? They would be up in arms. They'll be rioting in the streets. Well, there's always rioting in the streets when it comes to liberals and progressive policies. But what do you think would happen? Come on, folks. You know what? I am clearly getting exasperated because I really think that no one is giving Donald Trump a chance at this point to actually show what he can do in the Oval Office. We've seen what he can do on the campaign trail. We've heard what he said. Let's see what he can do now. I'm going to take a quick break. I'm going to get myself together here. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the other side of politics, not so much the policy side, but the partisan side. We'll be talking about this whole kerfuffle I've been talking to you about with the inauguration and the numbers. And we'll be talking about protests and demonstrations and violence in the streets and all this stuff in the wake of the first couple of days here of the Obama administration. Listen to what I just said. Of the Trump administration. I got to get used to saying that. Gene Baradelli, Behind Enemy Lines. We'll be back right after these brief words.
If you're a long-time listener of the show, or maybe this is your first time listening, you can probably tell that me and the gang here, we like to have our share of fun, whether it's on or off the air. We talk about 2-drink minimum radio and no medication Wednesdays or whatever day it may be. That's why when we found the people at Less Government, More Fun, we knew it was a match made in heaven with this show. Folks, we live in a time where government is out of hand. Our founding fathers did not intend government to be all-consuming in all parts of our lives. That's why we are telling you to go to lessgovmorefun.com, check out the website, check out the swag. What the people want is less government, more fun. Pass it on, make it happen.
Who might you save?
Your mother, your father, your husband, uncle, aunt, son.
Learn FAST, F-A-S-T, the sudden signs of a stroke, and you could save.
Your friend, teacher, boss.
F, face drooping. A, arm weakness. S, speech difficulty. T, time to call 911. F-A-S-T. That's F, face drooping. A, arm weakness. S, speech difficulty. T, time to call 911. The sooner they get to the hospital, the sooner they'll get treatment. And that can make a remarkable difference in the recovery of
your neighbor, the waiter, grandmother, grandfather.
So learn FAST, the sudden signs of a stroke, then pass it on, because you never know who might save you.
Your wife, your colleague.
Spot a stroke fast. Visit strokeassociation.org. Brought to you by the American Stroke Association and the Ad Council.
Behind Enemy Lines Radio is all about being right. No, seriously, it is. If you ever listen to Russ Gallo or me go back and forth on some issue, we always want to make sure that we remember who said what and when we said it. That's why we go to GoOnRecord.com. It's a brand new social media website. Challenge people on what they believe, whether it's in politics, sports, entertainment, finance, whatever. There's a category for you at GoOnRecord.com. Check it out right now. Tell us, what do you stand for? It's time for you to go on record.
Behind Enemy Lines. Back on the air.
Gene Baradelli back behind Enemy Lines. So listen, folks. Trump administration, as we talked about in the last segment, doing some good things. Policy-wise, I think they're hitting their stride early, especially in the wake of not having as many cabinet appointments confirmed by the Senate as should be done at this point. I think the Democrats are definitely dragging their feet, and they are obstructing the first 100 days of this president in an effort to make him look bad. But let's just say the Trump administration is not exactly helping themselves by wasting political capital on nonsensical things. And this takes me to my own personal political experiences in the past week, especially on Facebook. As you know, and as you've seen since last week, there's been this whole big political fight over crowd size for the inauguration of Donald Trump when comparing it to President Obama's inauguration. Now, on the onset, let me just say this. No one should belittle the attendance of the inauguration of President Obama. It was an historic event in the truest sense of the word. So let's get beyond that point first and foremost. Nobody is trying to belittle the attendance and the significance of President Obama's inauguration. But I posted a story from our friends at Independent Journal Review, which was really in response to a lot of photos circulating on the internet, unfairly, in my opinion, comparing the Obama crowd to the Trump crowd on the National Mall. Again, not denigrating what President Obama and his inauguration and the significance of it and the attendance of it was, but let's cut down the attacks already, liberals, all right? If you look at the photos on Independent Journal Review, again, a topic that's been debated to death since last week. But if you just look at those photos, they look pretty significant crowds. Not like the crowd photo that showed poor attendance for Donald Trump. That was taken a good deal of time before the event really began. If you look at those photos on Independent Journal Review, you'll see that the wide-angle photos and the high-up photos that are there, I'm not a photographer, I don't know technical terms, where they're high up and when they're over there and over here, those photos seem to show pretty similar crowds. Pretty similar is the word used. Not exact, not greater. Again, the president may want to say that he had the greatest crowd in history, and that's fine. To me, the crowds in those photos look similar, but again, this is all anecdotal to me. The crowds, now when you look at the tweet that started this controversy from Benjamin Applebaum and comparing one to the other, it clearly shows a crowd that is very small versus a crowd that's very big. But it doesn't give any context to it. There's a time-lapse video on PBS's YouTube page that shows the crowd coming in for the Trump inauguration, and it doesn't give you the time when they started the camera and when they ended the camera. It's these little deceptive points that get me crazy. Do I think that Donald Trump's crowd was as big as President Obama's? I don't know, and I don't care. What I care about is the intellectual honesty coming from the detractors on the other side, which, I thought maybe would take a day off. But I guess not. And not only have they not taken a day off, but people have been coming onto my Facebook nonstop since I posted this, my God, days ago, and trying to get me in the corner here to say that I'm defending Trump's analysis of this, that, and the other. I'm saying no. I'm saying look at what's there. And I'm also looking at the side-by-side comparisons that you're providing to me and showing you why they're not fair to the president. I'm not saying that Trump is smart for saying this, by the way. Trump has made a lot of missteps. I believe this is one of them. I believe that the Trump administration is getting used to the job, especially the political side of it. They just got through a very tumultuous campaign where they seemingly were attacked on all sides by Republicans, by conservatives, by Democrats. And that combativeness has spilled over now into the administration of government. And for Trump to argue about this whole issue of the inauguration, nobody cares about the size of your inaugural crowd unless you keep bringing it up over and over again. That being said, if you want to say that he didn't have the biggest crowd, you can't say that either. Because again, here's the thing. Nobody keeps track of crowds for these events. They're estimates. You could say that the Metro said so many people use the Metro. You can say, based on the volume of people, there's approximately this number of people. You don't know. All you have at the end of the day are photos. And photos are basically anecdotal and circumstantial when you think about it. That's all you really have to deal with. So enough already with this nonsense of the biggest crowd. And listen, 50% of the nonsense started with Donald Trump and Sean Spicer coming out and talking about the crowd. If they want to believe that they had the biggest crowd ever, let them believe it. That's just, fine. Okay. It has nothing to do with the governing of my nation. Enough is enough, though, people. Let's clean it up a little bit. But it's very interesting to see the use of the internet to try to stem off this backlash of Donald Trump. And there was a great article I read recently talking about how Donald Trump is not only the product of political correctness, which we've talked about on the show quite a bit, but that this combative nature is really President Trump being the first president to take this idea of postmodernism and turning it on its head. And I really got to thank my friend Evan Sayet, past guest of the show, for showing me this article, talking about how nobody should be surprised that postmodern America has chosen an anti-hero to be our next president. Definitely check out the article. It's on the Federalist. And it's a really, really in-depth piece that analyzes the American psyche. His inaugural address and the way that he's conducting his first few days, to me, is a product of what we in the society have been going through. I'm Italian. I love The Sopranos. It's a great show. But a show like The Sopranos is a perfect example of America rooting for the bad guy, rooting for Tony Soprano, a killer, a criminal, a thug. But the show humanizes him and takes it from his point of view, so that the point where the audience starts to morally equivocate. That is what has brought about the rise of Donald Trump. Things like that. Things like Scarface, like this article brings up. The idea of fighting back and turning the lens onto the opposite perspective. You don't like how I am, Tony Soprano would say, and how I deal with my business, or what Tony Montana would say. Remember that one famous scene? Look at yourself, society, all you rich muckety mucks out there that are basically doing the same thing, but doing it in a different way. Heroes who traditionally stand for good are now corny in today's society, right? Nobody wants to be, the corny guy at the party. We want to be Walter White. We want to, be entertained by that sort of perspective. We don't like the clean-cut good guy. We like Archer. The cartoon on FX with with ISIS before that was really ISIS. That's what's entertaining. That's part of our society now. So when Donald Trump comes along and takes these postmodern equivocations and turns it back on us, especially after an era of political correctness, it turns us inward and it makes everybody combative. The whole idea of postmodern for a Democrat is really a power grab, right? It's really to consolidate power and to make us feel bad about who we are. It's basically the power to shut others up, is what the Democrats have been practicing for a very long time. If you don't like what I'm saying, you're a bigot. If you don't like what I'm saying, you're an anti-Semite. All these things, right? Trump is now showing that he's above those criticisms. Trump has been called a bigot. He's been called a sexist. He's been called a chauvinist. He's been called all these things. And he basically turns around and says, well, you're whatever. And he actually takes the hit and gives back on his own. But by taking the hit, he is not giving up the power to the person giving the hit. That's what Trump's doing here. This is a really great article. You have to check it out. It's called Donald Trump is the First President to Turn Postmodernism Against Itself, written by David Ernst. Really great piece on the Federalist. Check it out. I thought it was fantastic. But back to the Trump administration, this whole thing over the crowd and all these other things. Now the discussion about 3 to 5 million illegal votes cast in the election. As an election attorney, I don't know where that's coming from. But listen, if he wants to say that, let him say that. It's basically him saying, I think this because I think this. Does it really hurt us as a nation to say that? Just about as much as it hurt us when President Obama said Russia hacked the election. It's basically the same thing when just saying that, and then a report comes out later on equivocating that. I've gone through this with you in last week's show when you listened to John McAfee saying how the report about Russian hacking has got to be bogus because of all the points that he brought up during his interview. But honestly, folks, Donald Trump is the hyperbolic president. He is all about the bombacity, the pomp, and the pageantry. Saying things like this is going to get him in trouble. I don't think that there were that many illegal votes. Do I think that voter fraud is an issue? I think it is. I think our voter rolls need to be cleaned up. I think that we need to make sure that people who are registering to vote have proper ID when they show up to the polls. It doesn't have to be a huge undertaking to get voter ID. Do I think that people show up and don't follow the rules of voting? Absolutely. I've seen it in elections all over the People's Republic of New York City. It happens. 3 to 5 million? I would have to see what Donald Trump is looking at to understand what exactly he's saying. Because at this point, I don't know. But this is another example of wasting political capital. You gotta sit down, President Trump, with your people. And I think you need to have a long talk. I think you need to let them know that winning the presidency is different than being president. You need to be factual, and you need to stay above the fray in a lot of things. I know you love winning, Mr. President. I know you love winning. I'm going to love winning too, especially with you as president. Come on. I need you to get a hold of things. This is the first week. I understand that. But it's time to pull back the reins a little bit on your people. I know that they are loyal to you and that they want to do right by you and protect you. And I know that you want what's best for the nation. At least I hope you do. But let's calm down with this nonsense. These little things, they got to stop. This little stuff like this, worry about attendance of your inaugural and this whole idea of voter fraud. Understand the weight of your words when you say these things. And those of you on the left that hear me say this, I'm not letting you off the hook, man. Time for you to grow up. Time to move forward and help with building this nation. I think this whole idea of what you try to do and try to discredit Trump and delay matters, it's only going to come around and bite you in the butt again. There's so many examples we can talk about this week from from the violence in the streets to the women's protest. We're going to get to that in a little bit. But, folks, let's get serious about what we want to do here with our nation. It's not about crowd sizes. I've had more comments come to me on my social media about the crowd size because I posted an article than I have about any number of policy things. There are 120 comments on the discussion of the crowd size on my Facebook. There are 0 comments on that great article from the Federalist that I was mentioning to you. Come on, folks, let's get serious here. Got to take a quick break, but before I do, thank you so much for listening to Behind Enemy Lines Radio. I'm Gene Baradelli. Russ Gallo is not with us this week because I can't handle the internet. But I want to thank you all for listening. Check us out at www.BehindEnemyLinesRadio.us. Check us out on the Facebooks and the Twitters at BEL_radio. And in case you missed any part of the show here, which usually broadcasts live Tuesdays 10 p.m. Eastern Time on Spreaker, you can check us out at any one of our rebroadcast outlets, including WJHC 107.5 FM in beautiful Jasper, Florida, WDDQ 92.1 FM in Adel, Georgia, WLBB 1330 AM in Carrollton, Georgia, all part of the Red Nation Rising Radio Network. You can also check us out at KLRN Radio, High Plains Talk Radio and Sackheads Media, ICRN, the Internet's conservative radio network, and Lanterns Radio at lanterns.buzz. But also, in case you missed any one of those rebroadcasts, which you can find on our network listings page at www.BehindEnemyLinesRadio.us, you can check us out on demand anytime you want as a podcast. Check us out on iTunes, Spreaker, TuneIn, Stitcher, Podbay, Player FM, Google Play Music, SoundCloud, and of course, the mighty, mighty iHeartRadio. That's right, folks. We are everywhere, and we're going to continue growing, and you'll be hearing a lot about that in the weeks and months to come. But for now, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be talking about the protests and violence that broke out last week. We're going to be having some positive comments about it, obviously some negative comments about it, but we're going to try to get as many angles on it as possible. Gene Baradelli, Behind Enemy Lines, we'll be back right after. You know what? Let's not do any sort of commercial. Let's let the Reverend Al talk a little bit, some equal time. Right after Reverend Al, we'll be back.
The show will be right back. But first, a word from Al Sharpton.
Good evening, Rev. Thanks
Good evening,
to
Rev.
you, Ed. Is this Groundhog Day 2? We are watching that was Attorney General Eric Holder, ABDs, about some Republicans at home are already beating the drums of war. Today, the Pentagon refuted that claim. And he said the American people do not want him to, quote, dwindling, they do not want him dwindling his thumbs. You can get a gig as a contortionist. Intravenous fluids and pills coated with gelatin. We don't leave our women or men in uniform behind. It's a monument to the hubris of Dick Cheney, Representative Raul Ara, Labrador. Years of abuse. I personally apologize to Mr. Peebus. Just ask to soon-to-be former Congressman. Democrats are outright jitty. CIA's counterterrorism center. Veteran Affairs Secretary Shinseki. Why do I always mess up his name? Shinseki. I love my critics. I have fun with that.
Politics Nation with the Reverend Al Sharpton starts right now. Good evening, Rev.
Good evening, Dr. Dyson.
But wait, there's more.
And we will much about that be committed. So there's no real conflict. Michael Druniak, including Lincoln himself, Daniel Day-Lewis. Behind Monica Lewinsky, the one and only Trey Songz is here. But Allison Lundergan Grimes, Gina De Jesus. When Gina De Jesus, Tea Party challenger Matt Bivens. People don't want to have their Social Security overall. The Republican savior, Mark Rubio's big night. In evolution and Galileo, I mean, this whole thing of Galileo, America's changed. Unless IT and Skillets, President Putin doing something similar back in, it won't change this fundamental fact about the GOP. Just how absurd these attacks is. Nearly 6 months after the dangerous traffic jam, the Thai military says, my friend for many years, Ilyana Van Zandt. There's nothing there.
And they gave this guy a TV show? Let's get back to our show.
Gene Baradelli, back behind enemy lines. Folks, we're going to round out the show with a very brief discussion I want to have with you about the other things that happened this past week, and that one of them being the violent protests that broke out during Trump's inauguration and the evening that followed, and then also the next day with this very large and significant and important women's protest. I say important, and you'll understand why I think it's important in a second. But first, I had an interesting discussion, again, online on my Facebook with one of my, I would say, many liberal friends. Yes, I admit I have liberal friends. I don't live in an echo chamber. We can't live in an echo chamber, not anymore. If we need to make sure that we reach out to everyone and talk about as many things as are important to us as possible so we can reopen this dialogue. Yeah, I'm part of the healing, folks. That's what I do. But anyway, I was talking to one of my friends about these violent and well-coordinated protests and attacks that happened during Donald Trump's inauguration and in the moments afterwards and the parties afterwards and all that stuff. And one of my liberal friends, very active in Democratic politics in the People's Republic of New York, actually approached me and said, can you do me a favor? Can you please stop referring to these thugs as liberals or Democrats? Because that's not what they are. They're anarchists. They want to see the world burn. They want to cause disruption. They don't represent me. And I thought about it for a little bit. And I'm like, you know what? It's a very fair point to say that. But it also isn't a fair point to say that. It's fair to say that these protesters don't represent the vast majority of liberals and Democrats. I don't think anyone believes that violence is a solution. Okay, fine, I'll give you that. However, if not for the fervor stirred up against Donald Trump, these violent protests may or may not have happened. I tend to think that some of it would have, but not to the degree that it did happen. You saw the very worst of politics with these well-coordinated violent acts. People with masks, and they were breaking windows at a Starbucks and a Bank of America, both of whom, by the way, had donated heavily to Hillary Clinton. Just saying. But irony aside, no one wants to see that happen. Nobody wants to see it happen. I don't want to give too much lip service to it, but I do want to give props to my friend James O'Keefe and Project Veritas for their efforts in basically foiling the so-called Disrupt J20 underground protest movement by alerting the police of some of the activities they were trying to do, and they actually got arrests out of it. So kudos to them. The fact that we're seeing, for the first time, felony protesting arrests is because we need to underscore that this sort of behavior cannot be tolerated. And I think America saw a great juxtaposition, if I can use a bigly word. We saw a great juxtaposition between the violence that broke out by these imbeciles, these morons, these hoodlums, these thugs, and what the Women's March showed us the next day. I don't want to pay a lot of time on the violence because you don't want to give any credibility to these people, right? But let's give credit where credit is due to this Women's March. There are tons of criticism I have for it, which I'll get to in a second. But let's compare it to the violence in the streets of the inauguration. No arrests that I came to know about. I don't know if there may have been a couple later on. Peaceful protesting with a political message that they wanted to deliver to the president of, well, it wasn't really clear, but it was still a peaceful protest that included a lot of, vulgarity and, female body parts on display and all that. And okay, I guess. I mean, listen, I am far from a feminist, but I also understand that, and I guess I empathize that certain women, and a great deal of them, feel like second-class citizens in society. Granted that there are many, many laws on the books right now that say otherwise, that in practice don't exactly, measure out. There are some businesses out there. I mean, listen, Hillary Clinton herself paid women staffers less money than she paid her male staffers. That's all you really need to say. There's a hypocrisy on the issue, but there are critics. I understand to some degree, but I also understand that in a lot of ways, this protest had a lot of hypocrisy in it. This protest was hypocritical because it was organized and run in part by a woman who has connections to terrorists. I mean, we talk about, from the People's Republic of New York City, Linda Sansour, who has familial connections to terrorism, and who has spoken positively about Sharia law. I'm sorry, but I believe those ideas are diametrically opposed. The idea of women's equality and women's rights and all the things that you saw in the protest and who ran it. I also think the protest was hypocritical because not all women were really allowed or invited. There was one group that was a Right to Life group, whose name escapes me right now, that was invited as a sponsor of the Women's March. And when they found out that it was a Right to Life organization, they were disinvited. They marched anyway because with a crowd that size, how are you going to know? But it seems to me that if you're going to talk about women's rights, you have to embrace all points of view of all women. Which kind of leads me to my third point that I want to bring up here about this march in particular. And that is, when are politicians going to learn? And make no mistake, the people that organize this are politicians in their own right. They may not be elected officials, but they're politicians, and they are people that want political influence or have political influence. When are these people going to understand that women are not a voting block? You cannot pigeonhole women into one category or one political ideology. That would be so wrong too. Just like you can't say all men vote a certain way. You can't pigeonhole a sex into a voting block. There are so many issues that affect so many women in so many regions of our country, let alone the world. To say that one march speaks for all women. There are many women out there who, like I said, who are pro-life. There are many women out there who are pro-choice. There are many women out there who believe that Donald Trump is the best thing since sliced bread. In fact, a lot of them showed up at the polls and they voted for Donald Trump. You cannot turn women into a voting block no matter what, because women have different concerns. The stay-at-home mom have different political concerns than the career-oriented mom. The inner-city woman who is single has different priorities than the rural area single woman, or the rural area married woman, or any other permutation you can think about that come into it, from race to religion to sexual orientation. You cannot pigeonhole women into one category. And it's wrong to do. Do I love protests? Yes, protests are what make America great. The idea that you can gather together with like-minded people and voice your concerns to try to promote change is a wonderful thing. However, I personally get a little put off by protests that have no real focus. The focus of this protest, in my opinion, was to complain about Donald Trump. It was to, quote unquote, hold his feet to the fire that we'll be watching you. They'll be watching you. I think all of America is going to be watching Donald Trump and seeing what he does. I mean, come on, folks. I understand that he's not your president and all this other nonsense. But can we please stop trying to turn a sex into a political party? Because you're not going to do it. There are so many strong, independent women on both sides of the aisle. To me, that's the beauty of America. The diversity of ideas is what we should strive to interact with, not based upon our race or our religion or our sexual orientation or our sex. Let's talking about ideas. And let's not worry about what's in between our legs. And oh, by the way, Women's March organizers and all the people out there, the day that you say that you're oppressed and not worry about women overseas in Riyadh, in Tehran, and other places where women are still treated as property, please, let's stop using the word oppression so much. There was an article that I saw today, which I thought was an absolutely beautiful thing. There was an all-female crew from Brunei Airline, that, bless them, they flew into Saudi Arabia as the first female crew to land a plane there in a country where women aren't allowed to drive. You want to talk about oppression? That's oppression, ladies and gentlemen. That's something that's worth protesting, ladies and gentlemen. Not the fact that you don't like who won a free election. Oh, and one last little thing for the women's protest. Yes, one of your organizers has ties to terrorists, and yes, it's hypocritical because there is real oppression out there in the world and you're doing nothing about it. But have we learned the lesson about celebrities speaking for you yet? I mean, Ashley Judd, Madonna, I mean, come on already. Don't you realize that's what got you here in the first place? Having bonehead celebrities who use their celebrity coming here, saying awful, terrible things. In the case of Madonna, something that may be actually illegal to say, and really distorting your message. Let's learn our lesson here. Like I said, protesting is a beautiful thing, but geez, ladies, I think your voice is a lot more important than Madonna or Ashley Judd. Don't let these co-opters take away your voice from your movement. And honestly, that's really all I got to say about that. And you know what, folks? I think that should just about do it for the show. Time for, I guess, a final thought, although the show has pretty much been in all thought. It's all been my thoughts, right? I want to thank you guys for listening to the show. Next week, we're going to have Cynthia Garrett, an attorney who is fighting against issues on campus regarding gender that I think you all need to know about. Gender hypocrisy on college campuses. All you young people out there, take a listen to that show next week. Hope you do. And I guess we're going to round out the show by simply saying this. As we're recording this show, we are at day 5 of the Trump presidency. On day 5, the president still doesn't have a Secretary of State that he appointed. He still doesn't have a UN ambassador that he appointed. There are multiple cabinet positions essential to the operation of the executive that have not been appointed. How about we give the president, I don't know, 30 days to try to do something to change America before we start jumping down his throat about things that he's saying or doing? How about, heavens forbid, we let a week go by before we start saying, oh, Donald Trump is a horrible president doing all these things? Let's give it a chance, folks. Come on. Give the guy a chance. He won the election for a reason. There are people out there that love Donald Trump and that voted for him. Let's see if he can deliver on what he's doing. Give him that shot at least. And maybe in about 30 days or so, we'll be talking about all the great things that have come out of the president's office. Or maybe we won't. Who knows? Maybe you'll get proven right. But if the point is, day 5, here we are. And you're acting like it's year 5. Let's give him a chance. And then if there are things to go at him at, which you saw we did on this show, we'll go at him again. But let the guy do something before you jump down his throat. And let's all judge slowly when it comes to anything we do, especially a brand new president taking office. We're going to wrap things up, but just a quick programming note before we wrap things up and head on out of here. We're going to get Russ back on the show very soon. The internet problems here at the New Digs, we're going to get taken care of. And we're also going to start, heavens forbid, start doing some social media broadcasting and possibly doing some Facebook Live stuff. If this is something you want to see, hit us up at www.behindenemylinesradio.us. Let us know that you want us to do it. We want to try new and different things here on the show, and this is going to be one of the little experiments we do. Listen, the Facebooks and the Twitters have always been very good to us, and we want to do a little bit more outreach to our audience, be a little more participation-friendly, create an atmosphere where you can talk back to us kind of live when we're broadcasting the show. And we want to get your ideas of if this is something you want to do or not. So let us know at www.behindenemylinesradio.us. Leave a comment on there. Send us a message or leave a message on our social media or any other way that you want to get a hold of us. You know, there's got to be ways you can get a hold of us outside social media, I would think. Well, even if there isn't, social media is good enough. And let us know what you think about, branching the show out to being a lot more fan-oriented, a lot more show participation, and if you want to see our ugly mugs on a screen while we're doing the show, who knows? Maybe we'll become one of those household name shows where you'll see us broadcasting from one of those fancy rooms with brick walls and a nice desk with our computer monitor out of us that we're not really looking at, and a microphone in front of us that may or may not work. Maybe we'll do something like that. But until then, it's time to shut this sucker down. I'm Gene Baradelli. This has been Behind Enemy Lines from the People's Republic of New York, and we are out of here. Good night, folks.
Our position has been compromised. It's time to roll out. Report for debriefing at www.behindenemylinesradio.us and look for regular communications via Facebook and Twitter at BEL_radio. You are the resistance. Behind Enemy Lines. A rock radio production. Copyright 2016. Back in 7 days. Out.